69. We have concluded public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Move the bill by Angelos, seconded by Smith. Starting on page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Representative Sherwood.
Hello, thank you.
Hello.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm so happy to be here.
Good evening, Representative Sherwood.
So we currently see that the 2.5% of the 5-year market average is guaranteed. And we do have a really beautiful graph in front of us here, wondering if the committee is interested in guaranteeing 1.25% of the LISRA as seen in figure 2 here.
So you're saying reducing the 2.5 to 1.25, or you're saying the chart adds a 1.25 guarantee, making it 3.75?
Yes, my amendment would be to increase that to 3.75%.
Okay. Discussion on the suggestion? No discussion either way, huh? All right, I think we can move on unless you'd like to make a motion. Okay. All right, page 5. Page 6. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Sherwood, I am going to spend a little time discussing the colored chart with our staff and getting a little better understanding how that might play. I think there'll be discussion on the floor about that. So, and I welcome that. Okay. All right. Seeing no further discussion, Ms. Childress, would you please take the roll?
Roll call vote, Senate File 169 do pass. Representative Allemand?
Aye.
Representative Angelos? Aye. Representative Harrelton?
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft?
Aye.
Representative Sherwood?
Aye.
Representative Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Bear?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 7-0.
Okay. You know, we have this re-referral on Senate File 17. I'm going to ask Mr. Obermueller to come forward since he's the only one in the room. And Ms. Childress, I assume we don't have anyone online for this, okay? And if you could just share with us the $10 million portion of this bill. Does anyone have questions about what this bill accomplishes? Okay, I think we're good on the bill itself. We just want to hear about the $10 million.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, committee. Appreciate it. Just for your awareness, for a little visual, it's only partially germane to the bill, but it's helpful just to see what you have in front of you. There is obviously a map of Wyoming, and the gray dots are major sources of CO2 emissions in Wyoming. So those are your coal-fired power generation utilities. Those are your natural gas plants, your soda ash companies, cement plants, those sorts of things. You can just kind of get a general idea of where they are. The blue pipeline is, of course, the existing CO2 pipeline in Wyoming, about 500 miles of CO2 pipeline. And the light blue dotted lines are part of the Wyoming pipeline corridor initiative. This was sort of pre-approval process with the federal government in case a private operator wanted to try to build further infrastructure in Wyoming. It's just a good background, Mr. Chairman, just get a visual of sort of what we're talking about. So, Mr. Chairman, the $10 million of appropriations that's in front of this committee is an appropriation really in name only. It's basically more of a loan. And so it's really important to kind of understand how the bill works, to understand what the appropriation does. And so if you don't, with your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, I might just spend 2 minutes just to make sure we understand what that $10 million does.
Please do, but I have a question on your map before you go on, since you brought us this map, and I really like maps. I do. So one of the things that you have on here are a couple of power plants in my community. And where are we at technologically as far as taking that CO2 off of a coal-fired power plant and being able to use it either for EOS, which is what this bill is purporting, or for carbon sequestration, which my understanding, you need a great deal of purity to be able to compress it and sequester it underground.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a great question. Bolt-on carbon capture technology would go on a coal-fired power plant like in your neck of the woods, or that big gray dot there in Representative Harrelson's neck of the woods. We're a long ways away from technology that makes that economical, no matter what we use it for.
Okay, all right. Please proceed with the bill and the appropriation.
Happy to. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So we all know, and I think this committee knows very well, that the federal government has chosen to use tax policy to try to incentivize capturing carbon and sequestering it permanently underground, CO2 sequestration. So they've done that by providing a per ton tax credit for every ton of CO2 you capture and permanently sequester. That tax credit is $85 a ton for permanent sequestration. There is a tax credit for enhanced oil recovery, and you all know that's injecting CO2 in order to help produce more oil. It's the most successful way of producing oil in secondary recovery is enhanced oil recovery. 100% success rate and market improvement in production of oil. There is a tax credit for that under 45Q, but it is $60 a ton. So $25 differential in the tax benefit if you put it underground for permanent sequestration and if you send it to EOR. So that's federal law, that's in place right now. And so what we did over the course of 2 interim is think pretty critically about what could Wyoming do about that if Wyoming isn't in charge of repealing that law or making any differences on it from a federal level, and we're not. And so what we came up with, not just we, but a Joint Minerals Committee work group, came up with this idea of taking severance tax money that my members pay and reinvesting it in a way that takes away, that balances out what a CO2 owner can do from a tax perspective with their CO2. So if you're sitting on CO2 and you own it, and you're trying to figure out what to do with it, you could, if under this bill, if you send it to EOR, from a tax perspective, you're gonna be treated the same as if you send it for permanent sequestration. So we step in and take away the market imbalance that the federal government did. That's what it is. So the $10 million, Mr. Chairman, it's what the bill does is it says we will pay $10 per ton of CO2 that from a Wyoming source of CO2 to a Wyoming EOR project, and we'll pay $10 a ton if you send it to EOR. Why $10 when I said there's a 25 differential gap? Well, there's differences in costs, transportation costs and other costs related to sequestration versus EOR. So you don't actually need the full 25, you just need 10. So where does the 10 come from? The initial amount to pay the $10 per ton comes from this $10 million appropriation. After that, the first 3% of severance tax from the oil that's recovered under EOR goes to refill the pot that pays for the stimulus, and then it pays back the LSRA. And then it funds itself after that. So it's not an immediate return, but like I said, EOR has a 100% success rate in Wyoming. There are 75 oil fields in Wyoming that have at least 10 million barrels of recoverable oil from 10 million barrels of recoverable oil each from EOR. Over time, the return on investment on this is well over 35% to the state of Wyoming. It takes a while, it takes a minute to do it. It's gonna take about 8 years to recover the initial investment and then refill the pot and pay back the LSRA. But eventually it pays back and pays it back in spades. That's the idea behind it, and part of the effort is EOR is so successful, but there's not been a new EOR project in Wyoming in over a decade, in part because the capital costs are so expensive that it's hard to get them started, and CO2 costs are high. So this helps put downward pressure on the price of CO2 for purposes of EOR, rather than elevating permanent sequestration, Mr. Chairman. So that's the $10 million is an upfront, and if it doesn't work, if there's no projects that happen, it reverts back, no harm, no foul, money comes back to the state. If it does result in a project, then that incremental cost comes back. There is no tax cut in it for my members. We still pay the 6% severance. We just take 3% of that severance and reinvest it instead of it going to its normal distribution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry for the long explanation, but.
It's all right. Questions? Representative Sherwood.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us tonight, and thank you for the good job you do in advocating for your businesses. If the federal government takes away the market imbalance, can you talk to me about what happens then to this allocation? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Obermuller.
Representative Sherwood, thank you for asking that question. It's so important. There are multiple off-ramps to this bill. The off-ramp number one is if the federal government repeals 45Q, this bill is repealed. If the federal government, Senator Barrasso has a bill that would equalize enhanced oil recovery with permanent sequestration at the federal level, that's preferable to us, honestly. If he's successful at passing that bill, this bill is repealed. There's also the Senate, you'd see an engrossed version in front of you. The Senate added amendments that stair steps that too, so that if the federal government says, well, we're not gonna equalize it totally, we're gonna equalize it a little bit, then this stair steps down in order to match that, to try to, try to equalize that. The bill, Mr. Chairman, Representative Sherwood, the bill does not incentivize carbon capture. If you're not capturing carbon now, this bill is not gonna talk you into it. It's if you already capture it, you decide to capture it, you just have an equal playing field about where you send it, sequestration or productive use.
Representative Allemand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does this affect existing EOR or just new?
Mr. Obermuller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Allemand, it would apply to any EOR project that either existing or new. Because even the existing ones, Mr. Chairman, have to enter into these contracts for CO2, and the source right now has that imbalance in front of them. So it's not as though, it's kind of different than a normal tax exemption where you usually do it prospectively, not to come in midstream. You'd have to meet the contract you were in if you're a private entity, and then if you're entering in a new contract, you've had this new playing field. So it's prospective in that way, but it doesn't say that outright in the bill. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned, sir, a 35% ROI after some years. I believe that I heard you say 8 years to break even. How far out is that, 35 years? How predictable is that?
Mr. Obermuller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Representative Pendergraft, great question. So I should mention that it wasn't me that did the economics on this. It was the School of Energy Resources. We had them and their economics department run the numbers on it. And they used historical EOR data and the data we know from the fields most likely to be produced in the near future, which are up in Representative Bear's and Chairman Bear's neck of the woods. And they plan that out. So it's not like if you pass this bill tomorrow, they can do these projects. There's still pipeline to be built and all that. So there's that. But again, you don't spend the money until it actually happens. And then after that, you start getting incremental severance tax. So that's why there's the delay. So the 35% ROI is over the life of the project. So that's several years, 3 decades probably. The good news about that is two things. One, you don't do EOR projects unless you know what you're going to get. So the risk on it is very limited. But even if, let's say, you do an EOR project and it doesn't work out like you thought, the first people to know that will be the company, and they will stop drilling because they will be losing money hand over fist. And as soon as they stop, then there's no stimulus going out anymore as well. Does that make sense?
Okay, further questions? I have a couple, Mr. Obermuller. Just trying to grasp the 45Q program. So if the program didn't exist, what do you estimate the price per ton would be just on the market for EOS if there were no competition with federal dollars?
Chairman Bear, I'm sorry, I don't think I can answer that question. I don't know. They're, like any commodity, it's negotiated privately between the two.
When was the last time we didn't have 45Q, and then what was the price then?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 45Q has been around for quite a while. The most, it reached the level that's driven a lot of the activity under the Trump administration, the first Trump administration. That's when they upped the levels of per ton tax credit for sequestration. So prior to that, there was really not very much activity, and then it got upped under the first Trump administration, and here we are today. So it's been quite a while since before the federal government stepped in on it.
Is there still another tier of $100 per ton for direct air capture?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Bear, there are 3 levels. I'm going to see if I can get it right for you at this hour. I mentioned EOR is $60 a ton. Permanent sequestration is $85 a ton. Direct air capture with permanent sequestration is $180 a ton.
180.
This bill doesn't have anything to do with that, Mr. Chairman.
understand that, yeah.
And it doesn't touch direct air capture. Direct air capture is unlikely in Wyoming. It does the technology such as it is, doesn't work very well at high altitude.
So are there, how much of this 45Q activity is going on either for permanent or for EOS currently in Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I can answer it in full, but there are entities that receive 45Q credits. We do have, current EOR activities, and we also have current permanent sequestration activities in Wyoming, mostly related to the CO2 captured in southwest Wyoming at the Shoe Creek LaBarge facility, which is the largest capture facility in the world.
All right. This severance tax, it's 3%, the first 3%, so we're at 6.5%, I think, aren't we?
6%, Mr. Chairman, for oil and gas.
So we're almost, it's 40-some% of the severance tax. So how, has anybody done an analysis on what that's going to do to, our expected severance tax revenues off of this particular part of business?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I can actually, I can send to you the entire spreadsheet of it that indicates that that's going back to the ROI.
right.
So it's, the companies, my companies will still pay 6% severance off of the oil produced on EOR, and that will flow in normally to the state. And then the bill creates a new account that just takes 3% of that and puts it into this account to fund it ongoing. The 3% is additive new revenue to the state of Wyoming. So that is, the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute has done lots of work on what's sort of the top line Wyoming could expect from enhanced oil recovery, and what you could expect from the most likely projects. The top line is somewhere in the order of $8.6 billion.
New severance tax, meaning we would not have that 6% if we didn't provide this credit.
Mr. Chairman, I believe so. What we've been trying to do with this bill and the other bill that didn't make it out of the other body was trying to figure out how we can start to kickstart enhanced oil recovery again in Wyoming. It's been a while, and for Wyoming, eventually all of our fields are going to be EOR recovery fields. So get it going and get that technology back on track.
Since you bring that up, in Wyoming in particular, are there other states that are doing this type of activity where they're trying to close the delta?
Mr. Chairman, many other states are looking at this bill and watching what you all do with it. There's quite a bit of interest. I think most people are with me, at least in my sister organizations around the country that do this. They're with me that it would be better if the federal government did it. But they're looking at Wyoming's bill and seeing if Wyoming's willing to do it. I have no doubt that other states will follow suit.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Obermuller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate it.
Senator Hicks, would you like to opine on this? Okay. All right. We will close public comment. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Ms. Childers, please call the roll.
Roll call vote, Senate File 17 do pass. Representative Alaman? Aye. Representative Angelos? Aye. Representative Haroldson?
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft?
Aye.
Representative Sherwood?
Aye.
Representative Smith?
No.
Chairman Bear?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 6 aye, 1 no.
All right, do pass. We're adjourned. Thank you all for sticking around a little while tonight. Abby, if you're available.